everyone is here now, correct?
Yes.
David, Kevin, Jason, Mark, Eric. I don't see Eric.
Yes,
You're
he's
not going
on
to see
here.
him. He's
Oh,
camera
he's down.
shy.
Okay, no. I just see at least I see his name. All right, we're gonna go ahead and call the meeting. And so I read the box, correct?
Yes, please. Let me bring it up here.
I have it here. This meeting,
Oh, okay.
this meeting will not be physically open to the public. The meeting will be broadcasted via teleconference or other electronic means. In order to minimize the spread of COVID-19 virus, this regular meeting will be conducted pursuant to the provision of the Governor's Executive Order N-2920, which suspended certain requirements of the Brown Act. All members of the subcommittee will be participating in the meeting remotely via teleconferencing or other electronic means consistent with Executive Order N-2920. If you would like to provide public comment, we encourage you to submit them via email to City Clerk, iwerby@ci.cloverdale.ca.us. And please refer to the agenda, to the end of the agenda for instructions on how to view the meeting and provide public comments using Zoom. And there's the link. Okay, so let's take attendance. Irene, please.
Yes. So we have Vice Chair Turner and City Manager Kelly. Thank you.
Here.
And Assistant City Manager Thompson
Here.
and Engineering Technician Jansen.
I'm here.
Public Works Director Rincon
Here.
and Chair Cruz.
Key. All right. So is there any public comment on anything that is not, well, we're going to get started with this before we enter with any, before we start the meeting, is there any comments on anything that is not listed on this agenda? Please limit comments to 3 minutes. To make public comments, use the raise hand icon on your smart device or desktop computer, or dial 9 if you're only using your telephone. Any public comments?
No public comment at this time, Chair.
Okay, so we're gonna move on to communications from Reese Foxen regarding 3rd Street Bridge Creek maintenance, 8/02/2020. And this has been addressed, and I would like an update from City Manager and also Public Work Director.
Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee, happy to provide an update. Just as a reminder, this correspondence from Ms. Reese Foxen went to the City Council under communications on August 12th. At that time, the City Council reviewed the correspondence and did refer the matter for further review and discussion to the Public Works Subcommittee. And this matter pertains to the 3rd Street Bridge and the city's creek maintenance practices. And I think the direction from council was to do some public outreach with the residents that were identified on the petition submitted to the council to identify the practices that the city engaged in relative to street maintenance or creek maintenance, excuse me, and to provide additional clarifying information. And so I think the intent was to just ensure that the neighborhood is informed of our practices in terms of maintaining our culverts and creek crossings in critical locations. And this is obviously one location where city staff under a permit does perform creek maintenance. And my recommendation for this item in conversation with the city engineer is to prepare a letter that is addressed to the residents to really outline the city's roles and responsibilities, clarify the flooding issue that's of concern, and also speak to where the city's responsibility kind of begins and ends. And I'll turn it over to the city engineer to kind of elaborate on that and provide more details. Mark?
Yeah, so I prepared a letter, and the letter basically, as David said, outlines our approach to managing the culverts throughout the city, not just at this location. And basically, we get in there late fall, remove any obvious, I guess dams or anything that has built up over the course of the year, and just make sure that it's open. And then we don't remove gravel or anything like that because that's just creek bottom. And, we keep an eye on it during winter high flows just to make sure that no debris builds up and exacerbates any flooding that can happen. And not that we can't prevent flooding. Flooding will occur. As you can see in the firm map that Irene is sharing on the screen, flooding does occur. It's been mapped out by FEMA. And Eric Jansen, if you want to pipe in, please do, because you've been at this for a while in terms of managing our culverts and also addressing people's concerns about flooding.
So this item has been brought up a few times before. And the simple truth is the elevation of the creek that you see at 3rd Street and Triplet is actually the natural elevation of the creek bed. So removing gravel, unfortunately, has very little effect over how much flooding is going to occur in that area. The area is a floodplain, and as a result, homes are frequently lifted above the flood in order to avoid damage. There's really nothing that the city can do that can prevent this. Removal of gravel does not stop this. So there's, we are not making a major effort to try to remove gravel and create a detention basin at these crossings because it really has no public benefit.
And Irene, if you could zoom in specifically, go further north on that map and zoom in at 3rd Street. Yeah, keep going. Right there. So you can kind of see the culverts called out there at 339, the crossing number 339. That's the culvert in question. And you can see the flooding area is much larger than the culvert itself. So really the culvert neither contributes nor prevents the flooding in the area. And Eric brings out a very good point in that the Russian River influences the flooding too. So as you can see, if the river's at that stage, it's backing up. So that's what's creating the backwater there.
Okay, could you also please explain more about what it is that you are able to do and what you're not able to do?
Eric, could you go ahead and address that?
So what we're able to do is remove loose brush, branches, and the like from upstream of each of the culvert entrances. And mostly what this practice does is it buys us a little bit of time when the first storms hit. And it also provides a clear access for our staff to get into the creek safely and remove more debris as it starts to collect in front of each of these culverts. This is just our normal operation. There is so much of the creek in private ownership that there's no way for the city to just clear everything. So we can't prevent debris dams from happening, but we can prevent them from forming to the point where they actually cause localized flooding. This is what we focus on. We do, on occasion, remove gravel from these creeks, and we do it by hand. And we do this usually with a CDF adult supervised crew. This is a group of laborers that we can get inexpensively. They set up a bucket brigade and they remove gravel. But the process really only buys us a few hours at the start of the season. And the gravel will quickly fill in. And by the end of the season, the gravel returns to exactly the level that we're seeing this year.
And Eric, it is understood that you can only access these culverts when you get permission from Fish and Wildlife?
That's correct. We keep a permit open with California Fish and Wildlife Department. They restrict activities in the creek to a period after bird nesting season. This is usually around mid-September. And then they set a hard cutoff date for work in the creek as October the 15th. This is the window we have to work. This is when we have the least environmental damage doing the work that we're doing. And we cannot exceed these things without some sort of an emergency or emergency order.
Okay. So I understand. Is there any other comment, or are there any questions within the committee at this moment before I open to the public?
Madam Chair, if I can just add kind of a related comment, and I'm referencing the letter from Ms. Reese-Foxen. She's, I think, on behalf of the neighborhood, making a request to upgrade or improve the culverts and or the crossing at that location. Obviously, I'd want to make sure and clarify that that is their request. The matter of upgrading that particular facility is one is an improvement that would really require very close evaluation by the city engineer, and would ultimately need to be a capital improvement project, because it would be a major investment to upgrade the culvert and replace the street section along 3rd Street at Triplet Drive. So I just wanted to point that out, because part of the ask, I think, in the letter dated June 25th is in regards to the bridge, what was referred to as the bridge, and I think the city engineer did elaborate that it's not really a bridge, it's a culvert. But if indeed that is the request, it would become really a much bigger project in the way of a capital improvement project to add to a list of street improvement projects.
And is there any possibility of that happening, or is that something that would have to be in a distant future?
Yeah, it would really, I mean, staff could undertake the effort of identifying, what improvements could support an improved culvert at that location, do some, very basic cost estimating, and develop a capital improvement project for inclusion in the capital improvement program. And then ultimately it would be council's decision whether to, prioritize and or fund implementation of the project in the context of the other significant, street maintenance and road improvement projects in the city.
Mark?
Yeah, it's my opinion, my professional opinion, that this culvert is perfectly fine. It has many more years of service, and at this point, to start putting in to get it in a CIP to get it replaced within the next few years is jumping the gun. This facility is perfectly fine. It will last another generation. I see no need for it to be replaced.
May I ask if there are other culverts in the city that are in the same situation?
There are many. Yeah, go ahead, Eric.
Triplet Drive is very similar, and we engage in a similar maintenance practice at Triplet.
Okay.
I would also like to point out, on the subject of trying to improve the culvert, please keep in mind that any improvements that we do there will have no effect whatsoever on the floodplain that you see on the FEMA map. That is the topography of our city, and there is nothing you can do to that culvert to change that map.
Okay. I have one question before Vice Mayor Turner speaks. What happens if the individuals who are at the edge of the creek do maintenance? Do they also have to get permission from Fish and Wildlife to do so?
Yes, they do.
Okay. And are they aware of that process and what has to be done?
They are aware of it, or at least I have explained it to several of the folks who have advocated for the neighbors around there. I have spoken to a few of the neighbors directly myself, as has Mark Rincon, and advised them of this. But we have not had a formal outreach to advise everyone who lives in the floodplain that they need to get a permit in order to work within the creek sections that they own, or what that procedure is.
Okay. Because I'm thinking, you know, whatever communication is sent to the residents, it needs to explain the FEMA map, the flood area, the procedure if they're going to engage in any kind of upgrades within their property. And yes, Mark, did I miss something?
Well, no, I think that's fine. I don't want the letter to get too large because nobody will read a letter. It's already a 2-page letter with all those other items on there. It's going to turn into quite a massive letter. So I'd rather address this as a public information on the city's webpage, you know, addressing creek and creek maintenance.
If that's agreeable to you too, David.
I certainly support that. I think it's ideal to have public information on our website that can be accessible about in regards to the topic of creek maintenance. I do think it's a good idea to send, you know, I've reviewed the draft letter. I think it provides good information to the residents, but that we couple that with information on our website about, you know, best management practices for creek maintenance. If you live along a creek, then, you know, it'll provide necessary information for residents to be informed about that process. You know, I think it's important to note that, you know, this is something, you know, reflects a lot of the historical development that we've experienced in the city of Cloverdale, where now we have new development standards. And that's part of the reason why we've implemented, you know, greater creek setbacks as part of our general plan and zoning. It's because of the nature of these kinds of issues that we now experience, where you know, really these creeks are floodplains or floodways or flood zones. And when you approve development projects like had been done historically in those areas, it creates you know, impacts to those structures. And, you know, we're now, you know, through the planning process, making every effort to ensure that development is either outside the floodplain or flood zone and or meet certain standards if it's developed within. So it's part of this issue is because of the context of the historical development that occurred in these creek areas.
Okay, Jason?
Thank you. I think Eric answered my question with one of his final comments about it. Even if we were to do a new culvert, it wouldn't affect positively or negatively the floodplain map or the risk that's there. But I just want to ask the same question in a slightly different manner. Is there a technology that's reasonably available that would move the needle in this particular area?
There is not.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Marta, you're muted.
If there are no more comments within the subcommittee, I want to open it to public comment. Irene, please.
Yes, I have 2 hands raised.
Please.
I will start with Reese. Let's see here. Reese, you should be able to speak, and Reese had actually submitted a few culvert slides, so I'm going to bring those up as well.
Will I be able to see them, or will it just be the subcommittee that can see them?
You should be able to see them. I just
Okay.
have to bring up a few screens here. Okay. Thank you for being patient with me. And let's see. Okay. Are you able to see everything? There's the culverts there.
We see it, yes.
Okay.
Go ahead, Reese.
Okay, this is the picture that Mark showed at the meeting the other night of a culvert. He didn't show one of what ours looks like. Barely open here, stuff can move through, water can move through. So if you could give me the next slide.
Of course.
This is ours. And in the upper left corner, if you look down where it's kind of brown in the middle, that's where the hole is. On the right-hand side, you can see it a little better. It's in the middle of the green. And then the lower left is a picture of it. And these were all taken today. So you can also see the ground. You see the top of the culvert and you can see the ground there. The other one is a little bit different angle of the same site. So it's the top of the culvert and the ground. If you can move to the next. And the ground is like maybe 2 feet difference. This is the other side of the culvert. Now the first pictures, you could see lots of vegetation. It was really kind of thick. It's grown in the last year. This is this north side of the culvert. And I call it the bridge because that was the way it was always referred to up to this point in time. Anyway, it's a little clearer, but again, you can see the bottom of the bridge, the top of the culvert, whichever you want to refer it to, and the ground fairly close. These bottom 2 pictures were taken last year when there was less vegetation there. And again, what I'm saying is there is not much clearance. So the culvert picture that was utilized in the meeting was slightly on the misleading side. I mean, this is a narrow gap. It's a narrow gap. And I know they come in, they dig this hole, and I always sit up above. And by the way, we're above the flooding. So this is not necessarily about flooding for us. It's about flooding for our neighbors. And it's about the sustainability of this bridge, culvert, whatever you want to call it, and how it acts during the seasons. Anyway, so they come in and they dig a hole. Yeah, the only advantage, as somebody was saying earlier, is that it fills up. Yes, but it catches a lot of silt for that year, and it keeps at least a little bit larger gap for a while, so stuff can move under it. At this way, I mean, they've had logs on the other side, they've had huge branches on the other side, which stop other things, and it just really becomes an excessive block to the movement of the creek. I know you guys work, I know you have limitations. I know there was some discussion at one point with the previous engineer, or one of the previous engineers, I'm not sure which one, about applying for, oh, and Paul, what's his name? God, escaped me. Also talked about getting a grant to try and you know, build a different kind of bridge from one side of the creek to the other. So I know you've got some definite problems with this, but also as a person living near it, and I could see, like you said, around Triplet, same kind of thing. It's difficult to deal with, but I want you to be aware that this is not an easy thing. It is not a big gap, a big culvert, like most of us think of culverts. It is a very narrow opening that does clog up very quickly in the storms. So I'll leave it with that. Just think about it and be aware that this is not some big thing that you can get through. Okay?
Thanks, Reese. We'll discuss this when I bring it back to the committee. The next person, please.
Yes, it'll be Jane. Should be able to speak now.
Hello, Jane.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for taking this matter on. I just want to reiterate some of what Reese did mention, that previous subcommittees and city councils, engineers have looked at this 3rd Street Bridge, and I am going to call it a 3rd Street Bridge because that is what it was referred to when the city looked at the possibility of applying for USDA grants, and I don't remember if there were other types of grants, but it was to actually elevate this bridge higher, because back when they did talk about this, they admitted to the fact that when this bridge was built, it was built too low. It actually also changed direction. It was originally supposed to come straight up this hill, and then at some point, and this is years ago, I don't know the history, but it was part of the discussion, was that the bridge was then redirected to go into Kings Valley, and it was built too low. And I don't know if the city looks at the possibility of applying for FEMA grants when certain disasters happen. For instance, I know FEMA brick grants are happening on it right now, and a notice of intent was just past a deadline last Friday. But it seems to me that there would be some possibility to look at FEMA grants or maybe USDA grants or something else as far as being able to elevate this bridge to the point where water can flow freely. And to the also to the FEMA map that you brought up and you had on display, I know FEMA updates those maps about every 4 or 5 years. I don't recall the specifics. I don't know what the year is for that FEMA map that you were showing. We've been here for 20 years, and I can say that the flooding has worsened over time. And as City Manager Kelly mentioned, yes, previous developments did not do any favors. The ones that was built in the 90s, the stucco pink and peach ones that are up there, created a lot of this mess. There's a lot of flow that comes down this creek very rapidly and does not have the ability to handle that amount of water at this culvert way. And it does. It blocks up, it dams up from debris that's coming with it, and it floods into the streets. And yes, we've watched our neighbors down below had to raise their houses. A few of them I know got FEMA grants to do so, and some may not have. But because of the fact that they ended up doing insurance claims over the years, we went from being up here on this hill, which is about 37 feet of elevation above this creek. We went from being in a flood zone X, where we could have exemptions, to a flood zone AE. So we are required to buy flood insurance up here on this hill. And, you know, I just think being able to pay attention to what's going on at this intersection with this waterway and looking at the possibility of doing something about it, because we watch it every time we've got a heavy flow of rain during the seasons. And you know, we haven't had a SAC crew or anybody here in the last 2 years, and I understand the reason why. You know, they're off fighting fires, but what they do as far as their bucket brigade does help. It does help mitigate some of the issue that happens. And this year, the overgrown vegetation that's going on down there, I mean, if we get any kind of an appreciable amount of rain, it's going to create a mess down this street. And as Reese mentioned, you know, we live up here on this hill. We aren't subject to flooding, but if something does happen, the residents that signed that letter, many of them live up here on this hill. We have to find a way to get down off of this hill. And that street gets closed from time to time due to flooding. So I'm just asking the city to be able to take a look at what the possibilities are, think outside the box a little bit on this one, and appreciate the time.
Thank you. Any other hands, Irene?
No other hands are raised, Chair.
Okay, so I'll bring you back to the committee.
You muted yourself, Marta.
Thank you, Jason. Okay, so given the fact that we have a skeleton staff, that we are counting our pennies, and that there's a concern that seems to be in two places in the city. What would be thinking outside of the box?
Councilmember Cruz, I would ask Eric to provide some background on what the timing would be under our permit to be able to perform maintenance work. And then secondarily, I mean, I know normally I think it's up until about mid-October under our 1603 permit that we can, 1601/1603 permit that we can perform the work. If that's the current timeline allowed for work. And then within that time frame, whether we could schedule at least some maintenance work within that area to clear vegetation that's in close proximity on either side of the culvert to support flows, and including removing some of that gravel that, because I can see it does look like capacity to a certain extent of the culvert is restricted. So if we could at least create understanding we can't do work really outside our city-owned right-of-way, or it's very limited, just to ensure that the culvert capacity is maintained to its original design.
Eric?
Well, it is our intent to get in there and do the vegetation management as we do every year. And we are working on setting that up. And we have our permit in place to do that. As far as removing gravel is concerned, we will not be able to get the adult supervised crew that normally assist us. They are with CDF, and they are handling mop-up for the fires across the state. They are not an option this year. And I'm not sure when they will be an option. So at this point, it's really just vegetation management that we intend to do. That, of course, still has the greatest benefit. Removing gravel, unfortunately, buys hours during a heavy storm at these locations. The creeks quickly fill in anything that we remove because we are looking at the natural bed of this creek.
And this is definitely a problem that the city has inherited. And it probably goes back to the time when also Kings Valley was developed. So at this point, the city will consider this situation down the road, but I don't think that it would be appropriate for us to promise that there's going to be a grant writing exercise in the near future to do this, given that there's a lot of uncertainty right now. I would say that we need to keep an eye on it, and whenever the situation or the opportunity rises to perhaps attempt to write a grant for something as such, but it's something that requires much more review from the technical perspective and the professional opinion of city engineer, director of public works, and other consulting engineering firms that work with the city. David?
Madam Chair, that certainly sounds like appropriate direction. We certainly note that, and obviously I think what will be critical for the upcoming season, rainy season, would be that we schedule and perform the necessary maintenance work this year, and then look toward the long term in terms of what other measures we can take when resources are available to do so.
And it's unfortunate that the standards of for building and the standards for culverts at the time of construction were not as inclusive of the reality of the surface and the geography of Cloverdale. And as mentioned in your plan, that it wouldn't be possible today to build so close to a creek.
Right, right.
And you know, when people bought houses in that area, they knew that that was a floodplain, not excusing. But this, you know, this is a culvert that was inherited, and it has gotten worse, and perhaps it's something that is going to be kept in mind by the city. I would say that we don't have a recourse for you at this point, other than the usual maintenance. But down the road is something that would probably be addressed as a major improvement. But you know, right now, also it has to deal with which are the priorities that the city has to address at this moment. And number one priority is wastewater and water for the town. So other comments, please?
Madam Chair, I just wanted to point out that the city is engaged in a planning effort to update our local hazard mitigation plan. That planning process is well underway, and in fact, we'll be presenting our consultant will present an update to the council tomorrow evening, and that's really a key step in providing a means to apply for funding from FEMA and Cal OES for the type of work that is envisioned and recommended for improvement of that culvert. And you know, it really does need to be done on a comprehensive level so that it's looked at, you know, system-wide, and then again, the improvements are then prioritized accordingly, so that you know you're not moving the problem around. You're really, you know, addressing it from the, you know, it may very well be that you address flooding, for example, here by addressing improvements to culverts that ultimately make their way under Highway 101, for example, because that enables you know, flood flows. But that's why it requires a lot more study and evaluation. But the local hazard mitigation plan will at least provide us the ability to seek federal funding from FEMA for this type of work.
Yes, because I do understand that there are many other issues with creeks under Cloverdale that need to be addressed before the mitigation plan could really come to fruition.
I have a quick question if I can.
Yes.
Is there something as like a statewide agreement that limits some of the liability of using, oh, I forget what they're called, but the work group that we typically would use under circumstances in which they're not already assigned to CDF? Is there something that's done well ahead of time that limits our liability to where we're more comfortable going with that than, say, accepting the offer of a service group or anything that may want to form a bucket brigade of some kind? Because it seems like that step would help make this section of the community feel quite whole, despite the fact that there's not too much more we can do other than that. But I understand liability comes to the forefront whenever we take any level of volunteer work to complete a city task. So if you could just kind of help me understand that a little bit, that would help me a lot.
Yeah, I would like for that clarification to Vice Mayor Turner, because I don't think that this is something that could be handled by volunteer brigades because of fish and wildlife. Eric or Mark?
We could potentially use volunteers. To date, there has never been such an offer. The city has either relied on the adult supervised crews from CDF, and the other option has been conservation crews. Conservation crews are very, very expensive in comparison to the adult supervised crew. So we have not explored that option and brought them into the field, but that remains an option. But I want to point out that even if we were to get a crew of volunteers or a conservation crew out there, or just simply hire a construction company, removing gravel is not going to prevent anyone from having to buy flood insurance who is in the floodplain. It is not going to change the elevation of the water. What it will do is buy us a little bit of time to remove debris dams by hand, just as we do every winter during every storm. That is what our crew does during storms. They patrol the city looking for our troublesome culverts and remove branches and debris as they form.
Thank you, Eric.
Okay.
And just to kind of throw in some reality too, you know, we're talking about 40 pounds per pail for moving this dirt. I don't know too many volunteers that can lift these things up and over their head and onto a creek, out of the creek. So that's another consideration, you know. It's a lot of weight. It's a lot of weight to pull, and it's not easily done.
Fair enough. Thanks, Mark.
Eric, you mentioned that the volunteer conservation crews are expensive. What do you mean?
There's a misunderstanding there.
Okay.
The conservation crews are not volunteers.
Okay.
Conservation crews are paid.
Okay.
We have never had an offer from a group of volunteers willing to do the work for free. Now, if that were to change, we could potentially coordinate something under our existing permit and perform some gravel removal.
And
But
who
as
supervises
Margaret
that?
pointed out, it's really hard work. This is not fun. And we cannot get into these creeks with heavy equipment. We're actually prohibited from doing so by our permit.
Okay. Well, I think that this year we just need to go with the schedule work. It should be research what the conservation crews can do. And I would also like to find out if it's possible, if the volunteers were found, if it could be done, and who would supervise that. Because it's not just coming to chop and dig and pull things out. It has to be totally supervised and directed by the people who know how to protect the environment. Would you agree to that, Mark and Eric?
Not only would we agree, that's actually almost exactly what our permit requires us to do. The people who normally supervise are our streets crew. We give them a training each year to ensure that they are up to date on the latest and greatest in the environmental requirements that are under our permit.
Okay. All right. So, David, I think you have enough enough direction here. And I think we have looked for alternatives, and we will continue to look for alternatives to address this concern by the citizens of this area. So the next step would be the letter, and for the city to have information on what is required. I will open any final comments from Reese or Jane on this regard. Any hands, Irene?
Yes, let me put Reese back on here.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you, Reese. You should be able to speak now.
You're mute, Reese.
Okay, sorry. I just want to thank you all. I realize that this is not a simple 2-second resolution issue. And I know that it will take time and it's going to take some money, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I just want you to be aware of what is there and what we're faced with. And again, you know, I don't have to deal with the flooding. The whole town of Cloverdale would have to be under water before we got any in our house. So in that respect, I'm very, very lucky, but it's really hard to sit there and watch out my window and watch other people flood and watch the debris build up in a way that it exacerbates that flooding. So anyway, thank you. And I also don't want it to cave in again. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Reese. Jane?
Thank you. Just a couple of last comments because I do question some of the information that was given as I mentioned before, the city did look at this a handful of years ago. And I would actually recommend, even though it is a 2-page letter, if there is details about the fact that people who have the creek bordering their property are supposed to get permits, I think that information is probably really important. And I would argue that most people don't know that. And having it just on your website, unless your letter is directing people to go to that website to find that detail, it should be included in the letter. We are aware of it, but you know, I don't know how many people live along this creek. I don't know for how long they've lived along this creek, but there was a point in time in which, you know, while we have been living at this address, that the city absolved themselves completely of maintaining this creek. They used to do that. And when the city made that decision to only maintain around the culvert area and the 10 or 20 feet beyond it, and it's apparently vegetation only, I think it's important that the property owners know that detail. And Mr. Jansen, I thank you. I understand that is the natural level of the creek bed. Absolutely, I do not disagree with that. Was that bridge built too low? Yes, yes it was. And it is a major issue that happens. It is not so much that the creek bed is the issue, it is the development that happened prior and the fact that that thing is too low, that water and all that debris slams up against that bridge and starts eddying and starts moving out beyond it. And that's what causes a lot of the flooding that happens with these neighbors down below. But, you know, and I appreciate any effort that might be done to look at possible grant opportunities or funding opportunities to do any kind of work on that bridge.
Thank you, Jane. Okay. David, any final comments on this?
Bullshit.
No further comments, Madam Chair.
Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to the issue of the shuttle bus at Kings Valley Senior Apartments. Could you please present the situation, David?
Happy to do so, Madam Chair. So there's a letter in the packet addressed from a resident within Kings Valley Senior Apartments. The concern is in regards to the bus service that is provided by Sonoma County Transit. Sonoma County Transit obviously operates both the intercity route as well as the larger intercity route. And this particular concern, a resident's concern, is relative to the timing of the bus service, the noise of the bus, or the noise that's generated from the shuttle, and last but not least, concern about tailpipe emissions. So I think, you know, kind of generally, there are three concerns. One is the time frame for the bus service, the emissions, and the noise. I think all three of those matters are things that we as staff have looked into carefully and have consulted with the transit operator against Sonoma County Transit. And there has been at least some ongoing communications with the resident in regards to her concerns. I think they've been long-standing, and they were somewhat exacerbated, I think, when the scheduling was changed to include Saturday service, which was done in part to address some of the residents' needs within Kings Valley. It's important to note that Kings Valley is a senior apartment complex in which this resident lives. And the bus service was particularly routed to that location because it's identified as a sensitive population that has you know, a high transit need, and they utilize that bus service in particularly to have access to the grocery store complex, particularly at Berber Plaza. And so, you know, some of the scheduling that was done was to accommodate the residents' needs within that senior complex. just kind of working through the issues, and I'll start with the concern about tailpipe emissions. We did have a conversation with Sonoma County Transit about the particular vehicle. It was determined that the vehicle that is used for the transit service, is a California Air Resource Board certified transit vehicle for low emissions. So it's really one of the lowest emission transit buses available next to an all-electric vehicle. So generally the concerns about tailpipe emissions aren't necessarily founded with the type of vehicle that's used in this particular case, because it is a CARB certified, very low polluting type of transit bus. And kind of moving on, the other issue relative to noise, all vehicles do generally generate noise. Again, with maybe the exception of electric vehicles who provide do generate noise, but it's very low on the audibility scale. The natural gas buses tend to also be much quieter than your traditional combustion engines, and therefore I would also make an argument that the noise that's generated is generally going to be lower than most vehicles. There is an exception, however, with buses. They have a number of safety features, particularly that are intended to address those with access and functional needs, and those include beeping and other sound attenuation devices that sound alerting devices that are intended to alert pedestrians. And I think in this particular case, it's a trade-off between safety and the noise that's generated by those devices. And many of those devices are required by federal transit authorities to be in place because of their safety measures. And I can certainly understand the concerns about the types of sounds that these devices generate, but again, safety I think is paramount. Last but not least, I think the concern is about scheduling, and that's an area where I think we might be able to coordinate and do some outreach with the residents to see if there's an opportunity for any adjustments to the scheduling. Maybe it doesn't have to be quite as early in the morning. I know that's a time when many senior residents like to get their errands and their chores done, but there might be some opportunity to collaborate and see if there's a change relative to the scheduling, just to address the early morning noise concerns. So I tried to characterize, Madam Chair, just what I see as the concerns, or outline those concerns in Mrs. Steele's correspondence to the city. I think we have worked diligently to try to address them as best as we can, and short of stopping transit service at a different location, I'm not sure there's more we can do at this particular time other than to continue to collaborate and work with the neighbors and residents to see if there's a way to address Mrs. Steele's concerns without impacting a number of other residents.
I definitely agree with you that we can continue to work. However, one of the reasons why we also have early schedule is because normally students need access to early transportation. Perhaps there could be, if the need is not there for Kings Valley between 7 and 8, perhaps it could be skipped. We could probably work with Mr. Albee. But one of the reasons why we have early schedule is because students need to have early access. And it is beneficial for all to have the Saturday service also. So I asked Mr. Bryan and Mr. Albee if there was something else we could do. And one of the things that we discussed is not to have any of the drivers ever stall or wait in that facility, to just do the route and move out. That's the only thing we could do. We're going to be observing if there is perhaps a driver that likes to stall there. And that would be a direction to the drivers not to stall in that location, to avoid any noise longer than necessary. And perhaps we could even talk, once we can assess when they need the service, we could assess if there would be a 7 o'clock stop at Kings Valley or not. But I think we have moved diligently to address the issues of Ms. Steele. And we would just have to continue working with her. Irene, are there any hands? I'll open this to the public now.
Yes, Madam Chair, I do have Ms. Steele.
Okay, thank you.
She should be able to speak.
Yes, please unmute yourself, Ms. Steele.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you and welcome.
I'm just curious. I've never used, can you see me?
No, but we
Just hear me. Okay. All right. So I'm so glad to be part of this meeting because there are some huge misunderstandings here. I am a resident here. I've been here for 2 years. I'm a retired teacher. I'm also a science major. So there's a lot of people here that haven't spoken up about this. They don't like the large invasive bus either. They're actually afraid too. It's sad but true. Okay, we're seniors. We get, pardon the pun, thrown under the bus a lot. And they're afraid of retaliation from the corporate management. So I'm speaking up at risk here. And so I hope that I get some success out of this meeting. The large bus that runs through the circle inside this apartment complex, that's very rare. You have to understand, this is our home. This is on private property. It's extremely noisy. Okay, and let me start off. I don't know if you can hear it. I have one on my desktop and I'll only play a little bit of it because it's very loud and noisy. So I don't know what Mr. Kelly's talking about, but if he lived here and he had his window open, this is what it sounds like. And if you can't hear this MP3, then I have it on my phone. Can you hear that?
Yes, the recent, yeah, we can hear it. And let me ask you, is this with the recent bus?
Yes, this is the bus. It's not quiet. And this is only a few seconds.
Okay.
This is inside my home, inside my office. Right? This is how it sounds. And here goes the squeaky brakes, which I don't see why those can't be fixed. And that's only 45 seconds. So let's multiply this by 6 days a week, every 35 to 40 minutes, 8.5 hours a day, and it begins at 7 a.m. This is how I wake up. And you know, not all seniors are hard of hearing and just stay cooped up in their apartments all day. I am not hard of hearing. A lot of my friends are not. And there's a stop right up here at the top. It's really not an official stop. It's not zoned for a bus stop. You can't really get through there when the bus is there, but I'll talk about that in a second. It's truly like living in a bus terminal because it's a circle, if you've ever been here. And the driver was really going too fast through here. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
So the driver really was going very too fast through here because out of all the senior apartment complex in a town this size, and I've researched this, Hillsburg, Windsor, and also Sebastopol, they have off-street parking. So there's plenty of room for the bus. This is a huge bus to come through here. When I ride my bike, I have to get out of the way. Okay, so he shouldn't be going that fast. And then he wouldn't have to lay on the brakes as much either. That's another topic. But 7 a.m., these other places too that I researched, they all begin at, let's see, I'm trying to talk fast here.
Yes, because your 3 minutes are up, and we would like to go ahead and listen a little bit more.
Okay, so Sebastopol, 8:45 a.m. That's so reasonable. And then on Saturday, 9 a.m. Wow, that would be luxurious. Parkland Farm Senior Apartments, 9 a.m. Monday through Saturday. Fitch Terrace Apartments, 9 a.m. and 9:38 a.m. on Saturday. There's actually a dash for the morning buses. So obviously, maybe people are being kinder to the seniors there. We're retired. So the whole student thing and people going to work, I know for sure there's no one here that works except for one substitute teacher, and I'd like to go back to teaching part-time. But they have a car. You really have to have a car because the hours are wonky when you're substitute teaching. Okay, now let's really focus on the tailpipe emissions. The confusion there is, yes, this bus, because it's a CNG bus, which is the low emission bus, that when they say that there's low emissions, they're talking about greenhouse emissions. They're talking about when this fuel is produced, that it's lower than diesel. Well, yeah, it's lower than diesel, but it's not the lowest, okay? There are tailpipe emissions, and I can send you, this is too lengthy and scientific to talk about, but the most important one is ultrafine particle matter with methane and oxides of nitrogen. Those are coming right up into my window at this upper stop. If you look at the pages I sent you with the graphics, there's a lower stop that was zoned for a bus stop, and cars can get by, and I'm not talking about that stop. But there's an upper stop. I don't know, that would be one of the solutions to do away with that stop. I don't see why it's there. The other apartment complexes only have one stop, maybe two at the most, but they're far away from the resident apartments in the other senior complexes. Okay, this is right up in your face here. So the emissions really are not safe, okay? And there's a lot of people with respiratory problems here. So, and I can send you the links for that scientific information if you'd like. So I guess.
We've been very kind to allow you to speak more than 3 minutes. I need you to round up.
Okay, I am. So I have a few solutions, which I did email already and they were ignored. Yeah, change the time. Why do we need, we don't need, there's no students here. There's no one going to work at 7 o'clock in the morning. Okay, that's really annoying, especially for a retirement community. We've done our deal, we've worked hard, we've gotten up early in the morning. So I guess, am I to understand the electric bus is completely off the table?
At this point, it is.
Okay, too expensive probably.
And it is something that has to do with the county.
Oh, okay. So one more thing, the Saturday bus, really, we never had a Saturday bus here before the pandemic. Everyone got plenty of food because like I said, it was 5 days a week, every day, you know, for 8.5 hours a day. Everybody had time to go get their food if they took the bus. And they said it was added because of the pandemic, which is actually counter to the compliance laws of California. Seniors are supposed to be staying home more, not out romping around. And pretty much on Saturday, that's what they're doing. The handful of people, very few people on Saturday take the bus here, especially.
Phil, you need to close your statement.
Okay, so do away with the Saturday bus, is that a possibility? It's really.
Well, that is not a decision that we can take because there are very many people who do use the Saturday service.
In Kings Valley?
Cloverdale is one of the highest use in the county.
I'm not talking about Cloverdale, I'm talking about Kings Valley.
Well, we will review this with Mr. Albee, and we'll also do some surveying of what is the use at Kings Valley. And all those other municipalities that you mentioned, they also have other means of transportation. In Cloverdale, we only have one mean of transportation.
It comes in here all the time for people to have doctor's appointments, and there's a little.
Well, I spoke with Mr. Albee, and there's going to be some review of practices, and there's also going to be a survey of users so that we can go ahead and make some adjustments. But I cannot promise that that is going to be changed. And I definitely like to access information from other residents to see what is the complaint, and they could do so in the
Anonymously, because
anonymously, and they can write to me, and I don't need to tell anybody who wrote to me or anything like that.
Okay,
So
because the pandemic,
I encourage you to contact your neighbors, to have them
I
write to me,
can't do that right now.
and I will be happy to pass on the concern of the residents. At the same time, we need to remember that there might be some changes towards Kings Valley, but there are services that we fought hard to get for the whole community.
I
And
am
the
not
community
talking about the rest of the community. Okay,
yes.
this is
So
special.
we will take into account your statement and the ongoing communication that has happened, and we will keep you up to date on any changes or any modifications that take place. Thank you very much for being
During
patient.
the pandemic, I'm not going to be able to communicate with my neighbors. Okay, I do not.
If they have email, if you could leave them a note at their door, you know, we have learned to become creative in this pandemic. So thank you very much for speaking, and Mr. Kelly and I will continue to talk with Mr. Albee about this situation. We'll go ahead and work on the survey to see what's the use, and if you could have some of the residents write to me with the promise of anonymity, and we will revise these routes and so on. Mr. Kelly, so we will go ahead and meet with Mr. Albee in the near future. And Jason, do you have any comments on this? Or anybody else?
No comments, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So, David, we have a plan here, right?
Absolutely, Madam Chair. I think we can certainly follow up with the transit operator and explore options. I think we should continue to be an advocate for an electric bus, realizing that it may take several years, but continued advocacy, can get it here sooner rather than later. And obviously that would address a number of Mrs. Steele's concerns. But some of the things that she did identify are things we can certainly seek to address by working with the transit operator.
Yes, thank you very much. And then is the next item is airport noise complaint. Is the person who sent this complaint in the audience to speak to the group, Irene?
No, they are not.
David, do we need to go into it?
Madam Chair, just to summarize, we have a online complaint form for filing complaints regarding noise at the airport. This is the venue which provides an opportunity to review those. There's really no action that staff's requesting. We just wanted to make sure that those do get in the public record and understand that our Public Works Subcommittee does have the opportunity to review them. You're on mute, council member.
Is Mr. Brad Horrell in the audience to speak, Irene?
Yes, he is, Madam Chair.
Okay. So, Mr. Horrell, we have 3 minutes for you to provide a comment to the group. You're on mute, Mr. Horrell. And please correct me if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly.
You have the name pronounced correctly. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for the opportunity to give me a few minutes. Just a little bit of background. I have been playing pickleball for a couple of years, mostly with the residents in Del Webb. However, recently, because of COVID, they have closed that facility to allowing guests. So as a result, my friends and I started playing pickleball at Vintage Meadows Park. And we laid out a tape using blue painters, a court using blue painter's tape, and sort of cobbled together a net. And we've been having a great time. And as such, I wrote to the city manager and asked if it might be possible to have pickleball lines painted on the court rather than using blue painter's tape. This has been done many times. I sent forwarded pictures of other basketball courts and other both indoor, outdoor, and pickleball is very commonly shared with a basketball court. So I was hoping that the city would put pickleball lines on a court at one of the parks. And to me, it doesn't matter which, we just want to play.
Okay. All right, thank you. Would David or Mark comment on this, please?
Yeah, I'm happy to respond, and Mark, you're welcome to weigh in. I do think there is, I certainly understand that pickleball is increasing in popularity, and it looks like it's a fun sport. And obviously, we don't have an organized recreation program within the city of Cloverdale. So to support, the opportunity to play pickleball, I certainly think there, at a relatively low cost, we could do some work at one of our two parks, either Vintage Meadows or City Park. I would probably recommend, if the subcommittee is so inclined, to consider City Park, because it's not within a landscape and lighting zone, and that may have its own unique issues, and could probably be done, a fairly low cost, and especially if as Mr. Harrell has indicated, they'd be willing to provide their own nets. Again, because we don't have a rec department, it becomes challenging to try to provide the necessary equipment. But certainly striping is not something that's too challenging to do. And I also just want to point out that there's an additional opportunity, and certainly Mr. Harrell is welcome to advocate for it. Tomorrow council meeting, we're bringing forward a resolution to consider grant funding from a per capita grant through the State Parks Department, with one of the options being a half-court basketball at Ferber Park, replacing the sandbox there. And certainly there's a tremendous opportunity to develop that as a joint use, basketball, half basketball, and pickleball court, if that's a project that the council recommends. Obviously, that's a longer term project, which is necessary for us to put in an application and secure the funding through the state parks. But in the near term, we could certainly pursue doing some striping at City Park. It would be more than likely be kind of a first come first use scenario, without having the staff to manage use. And it becomes more of a gentleman's agreement of using it, so you're not inconveniencing one user over another. But I think we could accommodate the request in the near term. We'd want to just make sure we get council support for that, if this committee so recommends.
I have a quick comment, if I may, Chair.
Sure.
So I love this idea, to be quite honest with you. Any opportunity to expand our recreational activities. I definitely agree with the assessment of City Park, and it sounds like Mr. Horrell is not married to any one location. Reason being, more parking is already established there with the small parking lot, and then the on-street parking. With, pardon the noise behind me, I'm sorry. With Vintage Meadows being in an L&L the way it is, they're not really designed, that I've seen, to accommodate a lot of visitor parking. It tends to be kind of the street side parking around the perimeter of the park itself, or parking in front of the private residences, which is still public park, don't get me wrong, but
Yes.
City Park is just geared up to have the parking be available and the infrastructure be there. It also brings to mind, I think it was middle of last year, maybe towards the end of last year, we talked about what we were going to allocate with some of the park funds revenue that we were going to get over the period of 10 years. I think we allocated maybe 50% of it towards physical park improvements. And it makes me wonder if we have a little bit of money set aside in that regard to bring something to the council for further consideration. But I always find myself a proponent, at least at face value, of any expansion of recreational activities.
Now, David, you were saying that at low cost. What is a low cost?
Well, within our means, and we didn't do a deep analysis on funding for this initiative. We would want to evaluate. We could work with Mr. Hell to identify what are the necessary striping improvements and get a cost estimate for that, and then look at the budget to determine. I think as Vice Mayor and Subcommittee Member Turner pointed out, there are Measure M park funds. Whether there's capacity within those funding sources to cover the expenses. Given that it's not doesn't appear to be a physical improvement, it's more, possibly striping work. It more than likely is on a spectrum that we would be able to accommodate within the existing budget, but we would need to really look at that more closely and then bring it to council with that cost estimate and what it would take.
And I would like to know what kind of maintenance it would need, because we cannot add more work to our very small crew.
Right, and that would be definitely something we would want to cover in the agenda report. I don't know if our city engineers, has any other thoughts in addition to my comments. Obviously, he's welcome to weigh in. There might be a couple holes that need to be drilled to accommodate nets, but not being intimately familiar with pickleball, I'd have to, we'd have to really look at what are the improvements that are required besides striping.
Mark?
Yeah, I know it's a very popular sport. It's started to take over tennis in terms of popularity, and a lot of tennis courts are being converted. Unfortunately, the city doesn't have any tennis courts. So we're looking at the existing basketball courts that we have, and you're right, City Park's probably the easiest. For my crew, it'd be just to lay down some lines, and depending on the netting design, I'd have to work with Mr. Horal and see what kind of netting, inserts he would need for that. But it sounds like it's pretty straightforward. It's just I want to differentiate the lines from the white lines that are used for basketball courts, so we'd probably put in a different color.
Okay, so Mr. Horal, do you have any last closing comment on this?
I do. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Just for your information, out of curiosity, I contacted the contractor who resurfaced the tennis courts at the high school, because I happen to be the president of the Cloverdale Tennis Association also, and asked them what it would cost to put pickleball lines on a tennis court at the high school, and their cost was $1,200. So the cost to have city staff do it certainly would be less than that. They're coming from San Francisco. Also, as far as maintenance, I don't see there'd be any maintenance different than what you have on the basketball court. We just need to, be swept or blown every now and then, and that's it. As far as a net, right now, I purchased a net that cost only $120 and sets up in 5 minutes. And when we're done, we take it down and it goes back into a bag that I put into the trunk of the car. It's very simple. If there's something beyond that would be a little more substantial, that's a great idea. But as far as we're concerned, we're just happy to have some lines painted on a court.
Okay.
And Mr. Horal, when you say your net folds out, do you mean you don't need pilot holes that it sinks into? It just sets up freestanding on its own?
Totally sets up freestanding on its own, yeah.
Even better.
Oh, that's clever. Yeah, that's clever.
Oh yeah, it's great. Weighs 30 pounds in a bag you can carry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Horal. So David, I think that Vice Mayor and I would recommend that you look into this, and then we bring it to council for whatever expense it might take.
Yep, I support that.
And, in terms of the school, yeah, just a second. In terms of the school, Mr. Harrell can address the school board on that because we have no jurisdiction there. Mark?
You can put it to full council for a vote, but in my opinion, it's just spraying lines on a court. I don't think we need council input. It's not going to cost a lot of money, but I'll leave that up to David if he wants whole council input on it.
Okay. It's probably within your spending.
Definitely within the spending limits, and we're bombarding council with a lot of things these days. I don't know if we want to bring up that we're going to modify a basketball, or not modify a basketball court, but just add lines to a basketball court.
Even better, man.
Yeah, it's just operational,
Yeah, if it's that accessible, then perhaps we don't need to bring it to council.
Yeah, I would just order a line kit. Like I said, probably a different color. I don't know if blue is a preferred color, but order a line kit and we would just go ahead and put the lines down.
According to the measurements that they require.
According to the Professional Pickleball Association's court line requirements.
Okay, and so it would be wise to, once this is done and so on, to add it to the website.
Okay, Kevin, you got that?
And to make sure that it is known. But then again, people need to understand that if they want to play, they need to bring their own net.
And it's first come, first serve.
Yes. All right. Well, that was a good one. All right. So then, any public comments? Anybody else? Irene?
Chair, no hands are raised at this time.
Okay, thank you. So let's move on to approval of the minutes. Oh my gosh, we haven't done that. So somebody move on that?
Make a motion to approve, Chair.
All right. Second?
I second.
All right, so that's it. And new items, revising airport lease agreements. We're going to increase the fee.
I'll take this one on. We had a discussion this morning. Actually, Myers Nave is helping us out rewriting our lease agreements because they haven't been touched in a lot of years. The fees that are paid by the renters we're trying to bring it up to the current market rate. And also a lot of the clauses within the existing agreements are not, are difficult to work with. So we're trying to revise them to come to a more of a standard lease agreement that you would see today. So that should be coming out, a draft form of that in about 2 weeks for internal review. We have a committee that meets every 2 weeks on airport operations. And so we'll be addressing that in 2 weeks. Again, we're just addressing several things, fees being one of them, electric use is being another one. There's 2 different categories of hangars. There's the larger hangar, the small hangar, then there's the permanently built city-owned hangars. So we're trying to make that refinement and differentiate those as well. So that's the point of rewriting these lease agreements.
And do you have a timeline on that?
The only thing I have right now is that in 2 weeks, we should have a draft lease agreement for internal review. Thereafter, it's up to really David for you to kind of see where you want to take it.
Okay. So any questions or discussion on this committee? Any public comments, Irene?
No public comments, Chair.
Thank you. So you have all the required information, David?
Yes, Madam Chair. I was on the call with city engineer and the city attorney. We'll be bringing this forward as soon as they're ready to go.
Okay, thank you. And David, I think it's item B is for you.
Actually, I'll like Eric to weigh in if he has any updates. Both our engineering technician and myself have been just kind of keeping track of this effort regarding the Vision Zero project by the Sonoma County Department of Public Health. I don't have any further updates since our last meeting, and don't know if Eric has any further information to share that he may have obtained in working with Sonoma County on this project.
I do not have any new information.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And we'll move on to the next item. Safe routes to school. I see that we have a new sidewalk.
We do. This project is now nearly done. I met with our consultant last week to go over a creation of a punch list. I noted this week that a couple of the items have already been resolved. So we're looking at the job wrapping up fairly soon, and we'll be able to take it to council for acceptance of the public improvements. So we are almost done.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, let me express my appreciation to Eric on this project. It's been, God, at least 7 years in the making, and finally it's done. The next phase, you know, is going to have to be funded by some other means, because using the funding that was provided on this project is quite challenging. It costs more than the construction, so that's just a heads up for anyone who would want to take on adding more, you know, a few feet of sidewalk. Is really, we should be addressing entire length of the boulevard to get remaining sidewalk in, and at that point the funding would be worth chasing.
Thank you. Okay, so Mark, may I ask you on the update on South Cloverdale and Hillsburg?
I've been recused from that project by the city attorney, but Kevin Thompson has gladly stepped up to the plate and has taken it on.
Okay.
Yes, Madam Chair, this is a CDBG funded project, first money we've had for a number of years, and we're glad to see the project is well underway. They started, Eric, I don't know if you have a current update on what the status of the project is, but it includes bulb outs and pedestrian lighting. It's a really nice project. So I think it should be pretty much wrapping up at this point. Eric, I don't know, maybe you have a little more up-to-date information on the status of the actual construction.
When I drove by it today, they still have open excavation. So form work has been done, demo work has been done. There is an issue countywide right now of a shortage of Portland cement. So it's becoming very difficult to get deliveries of concrete, and that may be an issue. However, I've not heard from our consultant about that being an issue yet. I just kind of suspect it's going to show up. They have made nice progress.
Yeah, the completion date was October 8th.
Oh, it might still happen.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you. And Threadway signalization project. Would that be you, Mark?
Yeah, I could just go ahead and start that. I met with PG&E and a consultant out last Friday to identify the source of electricity, because it was kind of left up to the contractor to define that. And we had assumed that we could pull it from the Ferber Plaza, from the electrical line feeding them, but that was a no-go. So we're dropping a new line, basically from a electrical pole that's out in front of Red Door Remedies, the southern third. There's 3 poles in front of Red Door Remedies, so this is the 3rd pole to the south. We're being running conduit from there all the way up to basically the brake shop at that corner to where the electrical panel will be placed. And so I would imagine the contractor would be starting here shortly. There's long lead items on this with any construction project, and that's, you know, ordering the signals themselves, because they get manufactured, and sometimes those tend to be long lead items. Eric, if you have anything else to add?
So we do have a start date, and that's going to be October the 5th. So 2 weeks, well, just under 2 weeks from right now. And the contractor has, I believe, 160 working days to complete the project. So this is going to take some time. So we can expect to see them working out there off and on for a period of about 6 months.
Okay. Thank you very much, Eric. Any public comments, Irene?
At this time, Chair.
Okay. And the update on sewer collection system smoke test. This already took place, correct?
That's correct. The project is now complete, and we have our test results. We did find some anomalies out there that will require repair, including one private resident who needs to do some work. But otherwise, we have our information, and we now know where our leaks are, and we will now start working on scheduling how to repair and or replace sections of sewer line in the tested area.
Thank you very much. Any updates on outdoor retail business uses in response to COVID? Kevin? Is that you?
I can chime in. I've been in touch with Nina at the chamber, and it seems that everyone is getting along with the space that they have in terms of outdoor seating. We haven't had any requests for additional. We are talking to Dahlia and Sage a little bit. They had a proposal that had a few issues, and we reached out to them. David reached out to them and said we're still willing to work with you. I haven't heard back from them, but keep a monitor with Nina. We're really counting on Nina to really be out there asking the questions, and I check in with her every so often. And I think most restaurants have been able to manage with the space they have available. When winter comes, I'm not sure how that's all going to work, but we'll have to talk about that when that happens. Maybe they'll be open at that point.
Well, maybe we'll have some heaters. Okay.
Yeah, there are some issues with the heaters and tents that the fire department might.
Oh yes, it's well, yeah.
But yeah, some of them have kind of cloth overhangs. I think Zini's has something like that. But anyway, I'm not going to make a problem where there isn't one, but
yeah,
we're aware that could be an issue.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And I guess nothing on the Portland Loo?
Yeah, the Portland Loos, we're just trying to catch up on a lot of project workload that we have right now. Eric and I will come up with a plan. We have a draft plan. We'll just kind of finalize that and get it to some of our local contractors that we use for utility construction, because we do have to cut through some concrete in that location to get the water and sewer and electrical. So it's just it's a process that we need to work through. And Eric, if you have anything else to add to that, but I think it's just a pending project.
I have nothing else to add.
Are you waiting on anything from council, or have you got all the approvals you?
This project would require ultimate council approval to execute a purchase agreement for the actual loo itself. And depending on the cost of the work, once we receive the estimates, the agreement with the contractor may also require council approval.
But we did give direction to proceed with this, correct?
The direction was to support the concept of a Portland Loo on the plaza. What we didn't bring forward was the actual purchase, and that would require that we bring that forward for council's approval. It's the actual authorization to undertake the purchase of the actual physical Portland Loo.
Okay. And how, let me ask under this, how are do we still have a Portland Loo in there by the post office? Or that's no longer available?
No, there is one there. It's been provided and is being maintained by the service provider, by Recology. So,
okay.
But remember now, there's a porta potty and then the Portland Loo. So the porta potty is there, still taking up a parking space. The Portland Loo is the hard manufactured device that gets set into place once you have the utilities.
The permanent one.
Yep.
Okay. And who takes care of the one by the river park?
I believe it's a franchisee. Is that correct, Kevin?
It's the county.
Oh, okay.
That's through the COVID relief that I'm not sure the exact funding source, but the county came to us when COVID first hit and asked us for locations. And that was one of the ones that we identified, and they're the ones who maintain those.
And there have been no complaints about it?
I haven't heard any.
Okay, good. All right. Any update on the sustainable groundwater?
Not really. There's not, the whole FERC relicensing takes at least a decade to go through. And I know that some of our northern agencies have taken on the role of combining a formal agreement so that they can take on that role as the new FERC license holder. It's going to be very complicated. It's going to take a lot of funding. They're always looking for other members to join them. And I think it's a conversation that City Council needs to have, because at some point we need to say, are we going to be participatory, or are we just going to sit at the table as observers? Because again, this is going to take some serious funding to acquire the whole PG&E apparatus that's there, and also in terms of negotiating a new agreement for the interbasin water transfers. It's important enough because we depend on those interbasin water transfers. They've been happening for 100 years. We've gotten used to having the Russian River flow during low, peak summer flows probably would be below 40 CFS if it weren't for the interbasin transfers and the storage that are up Lake Mendocino that creates this, bump in storage, or excuse me, bump in flow during the summer. So at some point, when we renew our water plan, we'll need to factor in that this project is going to have some significant changes to water availability, and that's something we'll need to work through.
David?
Yeah, I concur with the city engineer's comment. The FERC has issued a notice of intent, and that document has been made available for release or for public review, identifying the preparation of a feasibility study to evaluate the whole relicensing project, which as Mark indicated is a fairly lengthy process. It's going to involve a lot of stakeholders, and there's going to be a lot of differences relative to removal of the dam that creates the lake that ultimately generates the water supply from the Eel River that's transferred over to the Russian. So we'll continue to keep our eye on this, track it, and do our best to participate in this process, make sure that we address our concerns as
And may I ask, is there any kind of money amount that we need to be looking into saving for this project?
It's really unknown at this particular time. The partner agencies that are the initial parties to this effort have put up at least six figures. I know the Sonoma County Water Agency has put up $1 million towards this feasibility effort. It's certainly well beyond, I think, our capacity to support. But I anticipate down the road there will be more work put into evaluating what our respective role might be, and what the cost of solutions are, and what our potential cost there would be. I think that'll really be something that is developed as the alternatives are developed as part of this feasibility study that's in the works.
Okay, thank you very much. Jason, do you have any comments or questions regarding this?
No, I always appreciate these updates, even though it seems like it's not much because it's such a long process. I don't have anything specific at this time, but just thank you for keeping an eye on it.
Okay, and then let's go to our last item. Yes, go ahead.
You forgot the letter C.
Oh, yes, I did. That's your nice project to keep the cars in, right? So please, Mark, address that.
Okay, I will. This is a prefabricated building that we will, right now we're specifying it. We're going through the specification process. So we've hired Mo Engineering to help us with this building a specification for this project. They'll be starting tomorrow to survey the site, so we get accurate survey of the site. And also they're going to be doing a geotech study just to identify the soil types. The next step is to build a bridging document, essentially, so that we can put out our needs, how we want the building to be, what are, we want a mezzanine, we want 4 bays, etc. All the needs that we need for this project. And then thereafter, we will engage the services of a manufacturer that builds and constructs. I should say they finish the design and they fabricate on site for us. So this is going to be a ongoing project here for at least another year. The contractor that we'll be engaging works through, and David, you'll have to help me with that name, but it's a national procurement. I can't remember the exact acronym, but they've been pretty pre-qualified to provide low bid services.
Okay. So for the next year, huh?
Yeah, I'd imagine that the bridging documents won't be available until I would say spring. Thereafter, we can go ahead and put that out there to one service provider. They will have to spend some time on finishing the design and finish for the building before they start fabricating.
Hey, Mark, without going into too much detail in the interest of time, what is it that makes it so complicated?
It's not complicated. It's more of the approach that we're using. We have to define all the parameters that our building will need. So, it takes a little bit of time because we kind of identified roughly what we want there. We want a mezzanine that can have record storage. Okay, so there's weight involved with that. Then we want 4 bays plus a 5th bay, which is a lean-to, which allows us to wash down a vehicle after use. That wash water needs to be captured and put into the sewage. So there's a lot of nuanced complications that go along with it. You just can't order a building, say, build it. We have to define all the needs, all the parameters, and survey the site, have a geotech report available, and then we work with the manufacturer to finish up the design and do all the finish work in terms of, we want this color, we want this finish for that. For the mezzanine, we want A, B, C. We need stairs to access it, etc.
Oh, that's cool. Thanks for the context. It really kind of gives you guys the opportunity to come up with a wish list and what exactly is going to work for our needs. And then it sounds like this bridging document turns that into something that a manufacturer could actually make into a viable product for us. So that really helps my understanding. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I didn't know that it was going to have storage space, which is very much necessary.
Yeah, because right now at the courtyard we have about Eric, you don't quote me on this, but I think 2 or 3 Connex boxes, which means are those shipping containers, which has vital city records, and I really need to pull those out because if we're ever to get a serious flood, those things will be found in Hawaii at some point, and maybe we could recover the records then. But that's just not the best location to store your permanent financial records.
That's hilarious. That makes sense.
Thank you. Any public comments on this?
Public comments, Chair.
Okay, and the last one, David. SB1 project status update.
Well, we did provide an update on one project that is SB1, has a SB1 funding component, and that's the Healdsburg North or South Cloverdale Boulevard intersection project. But the other project that's on the SB1 funded list is the reconstruction of, I think it's 4th Street. And that is a project that I know our staff, city engineer and engineering technician are waiting to bring forward to, basically put out to bid when the time is right. We had given all the projects that street projects. I think it was a number of these other projects were just prioritized above moving forward with the 4th Street project for reconstruction. But Mark, feel free to weigh in on that one.
What's the timeline on that 4th Street repair?
At this point, the timeline is to take it to bid this coming spring with work performed next summer.
Okay. Well, I'm sure the neighbors will be happy with that. Okay. Any future agenda items?
None for me, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? I will go ahead and just give an update of any results from Mr. Albee, Mr. Kelly, and I meeting regarding the shuttle. That would be one. And good of the order, besides saying thank you to Eric and Mark on that sidewalk project.
Yeah, that's a big deal, you guys. Thanks a bunch for all your huge efforts on that.
Yeah, you'll start to see the boulevard, especially the south end of the boulevard, start to have a different feel because of these projects. We're refreshing, we're putting in bike lanes, even at the intersection of Hillsburg and South Cloverdale. You'll start to see how that becomes a pedestrian safety focused project because it'll slow the traffic down. But right now, it's still designed to 101 standards back when it was a highway through town, and we're trying to make our city, pedestrian friendly, bicycle friendly, just having our roadways be available to any and all types of transportation and having it safe for all users.
Thank you. Well, if this is it, anything else, David or Jason?
None for me, Mayor or Chair. Thank you.
Okay.
No comments here, Madam Chair.
Okay, so let's go have dinner.
Yay.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Vice Mayor.
Bye. Have a good night.
Bye, Mark. See you, Mark, Eric.